Hi, this is Tisch Aitken, and it is Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. And we have been feeling held back for a long time. I know I'm speaking collectively, but most people I talk to say the same thing. And you have to realize that this is the only week of the year where all of the planets are direct. Because we began the year with Mars retrograde. It retrograded on December 6th at 6 degrees and 11 minutes of Leo. And it was retrograde through February 23rd. Then we had Venus, which is also a personal planet, retrograde on March 1st. And we had other outer planets retrograde, etc. So we have, for a brief while, because this includes Sunday, I realize that Pluto does retrograde on Sunday. And whenever an outer planet retrogrades, we feel the energy 5 days before and 5 days after. So we're going to start feeling the pressure of Pluto tomorrow on the 30th. And then we'll feel it approximately through around May 9th. But when a planet stations, either retrograde or direct, it exaggerates the qualities of that planet. Pluto is newly in Aquarius. It was dipping back and forth, but as of November 19th of last year, it left Capricorn for our lifetime and a few after, and it will be in Aquarius the next 19 years, and it's not going back into Capricorn this year, whereas last year it was a few degrees into Aquarius, then it went back into the last degree of Capricorn. So we're feeling the intensity of Pluto in Aquarius, and Aquarian energy is very explosive and unpredictable and chaotic and brilliant, but definitely chaotic. And then you have the qualities of Pluto itself, which can add a sense of pressure. Pluto is the planet of power. It could be big power dynamics, people in power. It could be death and renewal. It could be major endings or turning points for people. Definitely feeling a sense of feeling pressured. I think that as we get into early next week. But with that said, I will repeat the fact that Mars only retrogrades once every 2 years. Venus only retrogrades once every year and a half. We got lucky this year and both had both of them retrograde and really close to one another. So when Mars stationed direct, it was like a little over a week after, then Venus retrograded. And you have to realize that Mars retrograded on December 6th at 6 degrees and 11 minutes of the fixed fire sign of Leo. It returned to Cancer on January 6th, where it doesn't love being. And it was, in Cancer a long time, and it finally clears its shadow on May 2nd, on Friday, and it clears 6 degrees and 11 minutes of Leo. So we're finally moving in that way, full steam ahead, but we have fixed energy too, and I think people are feeling stuck. And you have to remember that we had three pairings, power dynamics of, let's see, Mars opposite Pluto. That's intense, that's combat, that's very warlike. It can be explosive energy too. Mars is the god of war. Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. And the first opposition occurred when Pluto was still in Capricorn and Mars was in Cancer at the last degrees on November 3rd. The second opposition occurred on January 3rd, newly in Aquarius and Leo, and that was 3 days before the fires broke out in Los Angeles and close to LA's Pluto return itself, which will become exact next year. We had the third and final opposition on April 26th, this past Saturday, and that was at 3 degrees of Aquarius and Leo, or Leo and Aquarius, I should say, Mars and Pluto. And many of the stories I heard took place after. Generally, we feel Mars energy before it becomes exact. We can feel it when it's building up. And if you think of it, there are huge power outages in Europe, in Portugal, and most of Spain. There have been huge car pileups, unfortunately, and very bad accidents on the road. That's been going on this weekend. On a lighter note, not as dramatic, there was a big brawl, I guess, that broke out on Carnival cruise lines, and I think 26 people were deemed never to sail again, at least with their cruise line. And that would show the battling aspect. That's kind of intense. Must have been quite a fight. But, you know, in your own life and in my life, it's a lot of emotional intensity. Pluto can also can represent our shadow self. It can represent our subconscious. It can represent our issues that we haven't dealt with, our painful issues that we haven't worked out. And Mars is very impulsive, and so people can act out in rage. And again, we've had 3 oppositions. The first was right before the United States election. The second one, again, was the very beginning of January, and that was before the nodes of fate changed signs. So the North Node at that time was at the world point at 0 degrees of Aries. That's the Aries point, the beginning of the zodiac wheel. And then the nodes of fate also changed signs on January 12th. So they went from Aries, Libra to Pisces, Virgo. Then we get to the fact that Venus and Saturn have been dancing together on and off for a few months. That's a lot of fun. Saturn is restrictions, and yet we had Venus for the majority of the time exalted and beautiful in Pisces. Well, the buzzkill is that basically Saturn was holding that back. And so the two met up. Venus actually ingressed into Pisces initially on January 2nd. And again, I love Venus in Pisces. I love people that have it. I love when it's in Pisces. If there's too much Pisces, because I can get lost with too much Pisces, as many of us can. And so we had Venus ingress into Pisces on January 2nd. Then it had its first pairing with, now I'm getting to Neptune, so I'll get to Neptune first. We'll get to Saturn. So I was talking about Saturn, then we'll get to Neptune. So we had Venus coming, meeting up with the planet of restrictions and challenges. The first time was January 18th, 2 days before Inauguration Day. The second time was April 7th. That was the day that Mercury stationed direct in Pisces at 26 degrees and 49 minutes. And it was also 3 days after we had that initial really big drop with the stock market. And that's been very rocky, obviously, since then. And Venus and Saturn have been dancing together all of the month of April. And they met up a third and final time on April 20, now I'm losing track, April 24th. And so that has been going on all the month of April. Even the end of March, we started feeling that buildup. And Venus, again, it did initially retrograde on March 1st, and it retrograded at 10 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries. Then it returned to Pisces on March 29th, and then it stationed direct on April 12th at, what did it station at? It stationed at 24 degrees and 38 minutes of Pisces. And again, Venus loves being in Pisces, but this was not an easy journey of Venus in Pisces. And then we've got Venus-Neptune. Well, Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, and it can be very creative and imaginative and dreamy and manifesting energy. It can be really beautiful. But we had the Venus-Saturn restrictive energy. We had Venus already entering its shadow and then retrograding in mid-April, let's say. We had Mars retrograde through the end of February and then moving like a turtle and just clearing its shadow on May 2nd. Remember, it retrograded on December 6th. It entered its shadow initially on October 2nd when it got to Cancer. So basically, it it's been a very big journey for all of us, and it's been a very held back energy. And so we had Venus, Neptune. Okay, they met up on February 1st the first time. And again, that can be incredibly magical energy. It can also dissolve things. Pisces rules the ocean, and it's boundless. It can dissolve delusions. It can make you delusional, but it also can bring you clarity where you suddenly see something, and it can be very disappointing. Again, Venus loves being in Pisces, and it can be very magical, but it can be very sensitive energy. The second pairing of the two occurred on March 27th, and now we have Venus stationed direct on April 12th, which was the day of the full moon in Libra, which officially ended eclipse season. And remember, Mercury retrograded on March 15th, initially at 9 degrees and 36 minutes of Aries. It returned to Pisces on March 27th, and then it stationed direct on April 7th. And Venus followed suit. It took a longer time, but it retrograded within a little less than 2 degrees of where Mercury retrograded, initially in Aries, returned to Pisces at the end of March, and then stationed direct at 24 degrees and 38 minutes of Pisces. So again, within about 2 degrees, a little less than 2 degrees of where Mercury stationed direct. So giving us a lot of energy to reassess, reevaluate, reconsider the loss we've all experienced, because there's no way that anybody watching this, and I know we all want to tap into love and joy, and we absolutely should. We have to be positive for ourselves so that we manage. We have to be positive for other people because we want to bring people up. This is a very tough time with mental health and with world events and a lot in the economy. There are a lot of big concerns for many people. But we also have to be realistic that this has been really hard, and it's very unpredictable. And we're seeing the really early stages of Pluto in Aquarius, even though Pluto did initially enter Aquarius from March 23rd of 2023 through July 1st of that year. And then for a longer period last year. But again, it kept going back to late degrees of Capricorn. That's done. That is done. And we have to recognize too that there's been a big focus on Aries and Pisces in this story. We had the eclipses in Aries, Libra, that began in April of 2023, April 20th. And we had our final eclipse in Aries on March 29th at 9 degrees of Aries. Very close to where Mercury stationed direct, and where Venus stationed direct. Again, giving you a lot of information of how you can be courageous and bold and move ahead in a time where you're going to have to deal with more unpredictability. Imagine being in Portugal or Spain right now. And those are beautiful places. I've been to both places, not extensively, but I have. And I know they're gorgeous places. And great culture, great atmosphere. It doesn't matter even if it weren't, but it's an awful thing to go through. And all the people in so many ways impacted. And, there's so many unpredictable things that have been at play. This year, think of all the plane crashes, metaphorically and in our own lives. A lot of tech issues for a lot of us. And yet, we're having to deal with technology more than ever. And the thing I wanted to talk about too, so we have Venus finally leaving Pisces. I know it dipped into Aries and then went back into Pisces. It leaves Aries tomorrow at 1:16 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and it remains in Aries through June 6th. Venus doesn't love being in Aries. It tends to go for the chase, and sometimes it can be a little bit, it gets bored, but then it gets a little too ardent. It's not bad, but it can sometimes be a little bit relax, But in this way, I have to say, in the year we've been in, we had so much Neptunian energy because We had Saturn meet up with the North Node of Karma in Pisces. We had Neptune meet up with the North Node in Karma earlier in the year on February 7th. We had Venus and Saturn and the North Node together. There have been very karmic decisions, endings, realizations. That is the final sign of the zodiac. And the last degree of Pisces, it's not only the last degree of the zodiac and of Pisces, it's also a fixed star known as Shiat, which I discuss a lot, and I think that it's important to talk about. And given what we're all dealing with, I think the Aries Pisces dance, back and forth, and even with the eclipses, we went from, which always, the nodes of the moon are always retrograde, so they're always moving backwards. So we had the eclipses in the Aries Libra axis. Now they've, retrograded back to the Pisces Virgo axis. But then we had Venus and Mercury doing that Aries Pisces dance, as we completed the last eclipse in Aries, and now we started the first eclipse in Pisces in September. But again, Mars was retrograde this year. For the majority of the retrograde time, it was in Cancer, where it does not like being. It's in its fall position. It's very emotionally triggered. It's not logical, gets its feelings hurt. But we have to be courageous, but we have to think like an Aries, in the sense that what I like about Aries as a Scorpio is that Mars rules Aries in modern astrology. It does rule Scorpio in ancient astrology. But the difference is that not every Aries is a hothead either. I know quite a few that aren't. I know quite a few that are. But the thing with them is, generally, if they are a little fiery, they get mad and then they let it go. Scorpio, well, I've had quite a few Scorpios in my life. And it's a little different. And I had a Scorpio father with Mars and Scorpio. It built up, and then that didn't necessarily just roll off. So, you have to think of the fact that we're in a time where we can get more triggered. Mars was out of bounds for most of this year, too, so far. It was out of bounds from, I believe, December 30th through April 7th, which means it was not playing by the rules and acting excessive, making people more triggered and reactive, etc. So we have to try to find coping skills to deal in an unpredictable world, but also realize that Neptune is newly in Aries. There's more Aries focus. It's still close to the world point. It's at 1 degree of Aries now. Venus has its third and final pairing on May 2nd at 1:09 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And it's the first time in our lifetime that it meets up with Neptune in Aries. Venus may not be exalted in Aries like it is in Pisces, but Venus wasn't having a lot of fun in Pisces this round because it was getting surrounded by Saturn and Neptune and the North Node, and it just wasn't that fun, and it was retrograde. But Venus meeting up with Neptune, well, Mercury did that. Mercury entered Aries April 15th or April 16th, depending on where you live, and then it met up with Neptune for the first time. Every time a personal planet meets up with Neptune now, the next 7 years, it's going to meet up with Neptune in Aries. Right now, Neptune is still at a very early degree. And Neptune is the dream. And Neptune rules Pisces. So that was a big deal, the last few months, having Neptune at the last degrees, having all these planets meeting up in the North Node. It's been very heavy. There's been a lot of endings, a lot of loss. Whenever there's a lot of Pisces, I find a lot of loss. It's the final sign. And for those that are weak or fragile, they're holding on by a thread. They get release. They get comfort. And I was discussing Shiat, and I got a little off track, as Neptune is wont to do, and I am wont to do. And Shiat is connected with misfortune, with sadness, with being lost at sea. It's in the chart of the Titanic. When the Titanic began to sink, the moon in Pisces met up with Shiat, which is 29 degrees of Pisces. You can give it a couple of degrees, but definitely I'd say 27 to 28, 29 degrees of Pisces, definitely. I'd give it even 27 to 29 degrees of Pisces. Saturn is currently at 27 degrees of Pisces. Neptune is newly in the sign of Aries. Today as I speak, Venus is at Shiat. It's at 29 degrees of Pisces. And over the weekend, I can't think of her last name right now. I'm sorry, Virginia. I can't think of her last name. I see the first part of the name. I won't say it. But the Epstein survivor committed suicide and took her life at the age of 41. A young woman that was very strong in fighting for justice and for what had happened to her. And again, you've got that fixed star Shiat. There was a lot of Pisces energy in March, and there were a few public suicides at that time. There's one woman that was on a rock cruise that jumped off a ship, and while the guests were there, and then David Hasselhoff's ex-wife also took her life. I know those are people that most of us probably don't know, but it's still public examples because it's a big deal. Shiat is definitely connected with self-undoing. And last year, from May 4th through September 4th, Neptune was transiting at that degree. And the first 6 weeks of that, I heard of 3 suicides from 3 different clients. I didn't know the people that took their lives, but I did know the people pretty well that got affected by it. So this is something where we have to be very centered on the fact that as we're going into a new dream with Neptune and Aries, having courage to be a spiritual warrior. We've been working on Neptune and Pisces on and off, because now it's in Aries, since 2011. We're going to have Saturn, the planet of karma, challenges, restriction, and structures, as well as responsibility and boundaries, leave the sign of Pisces, which is boundless, from May 24th through September 1st. Saturn will get as far as 1 degree of Aries, and Neptune will be in Aries. Again, it entered on March 29th, and it'll be there through October 22nd. And then it returns to the last degree of Pisces, gets back to Shiat. Saturn returns to Shiat on September 1st, Neptune on October 22nd. But they're going again from that late degree, from the late degrees of Pisces to the very beginning degrees of Aries. We have to find ways to have compassion for ourselves, for other people. There's a lot of violence and anger and impatience in the world. I think we can all say at times we're guilty of that ourselves. This is 5 years post-pandemic, and there's a lot of other crazy things going on right now in the world, safe to say. But a lot of things we also have to realize. We're still newly in the sign of Pluto in Aquarius. Neptune just went into Aries, and it's going to be there through the end of October, but it's only getting to 2 degrees of Aries. So it's got a while to work and work its magic. And this is a whole new identity around spirituality, creativity, and love. Aries can be a very creative sign. It's the first sign of the zodiac, and it's cardinal fire. It's passionate. And Saturn is going to be there again from May 24th through September 1st. Both meet up at 0 degrees of Aries, 0 degrees and 45 minutes of Aries on February 20th of next year. Again, the world point hitting all of us. We could let things dissolve and end, or we could structure a new dream. Pluto in Aquarius can be very revolutionary energy. It can also be very inventive energy. It can be very exciting. It can be about building new communities in a time where people are being plagued by mental health and depression and violence and many misjustices. So there are a lot of things we can work with. Uranus hasn't even changed signs yet, and that will happen from July 7th through November 7th. These are all masculine signs, meaning fire and air. Aries is fire, Gemini is air. Uranus and Gemini could be innovating in so many different ways with communication and learning and networking. We need to build community again. We need to come together again. And I think Venus and Neptune, the final pairing in Aries on May 2nd. I hope you're doing something creative, whether you're going out or maybe doing a little bit of journaling at some point over the weekend. I'm seeing my friend's band on Saturday, and I'm really excited because I've never seen them on the East Coast, so that'll be very exciting. And it's very magical energy that'll still be looming. And yeah, we're all going to be feeling the intensity of Pluto. Hopefully nothing dramatic happens in the next few days. But the Mars-Pluto opposition is obviously still in effect because many of those things that happened, like the outages and those huge power outages, happened after Mars and Pluto opposed each other on the 26th of April. The only thing that happened, I believe, on the very date was the big fight on the Carnival cruise, and that's really the least of our problems. So I wish you all a lot of luck. We got the planets direct, so remember, this is the only week of the year. Take action. If there's something even later in the year, take micro steps now to get it in place. Network, pitch your ideas, get your manuscript done or whatever you're trying to work on if you're near the end. Try to get it to somebody now. Mars clears its shadow May 2nd. Venus will clear its shadow on May 16th. But we're going to have Pluto retrograde, the outer planets retrograde for several months a year. Use this window now. Good luck. Take care. And it is another week.